Hey y'all, this is Sam from the Roots of Change podcast, and I am so excited because I have two amazing organizers with me today talking about Get Free, the organization that is focused on getting Gen Z and millennials out and activated. So Nicole Carty, Anthony Torres, I'm so excited to have you guys join us. Do you want to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about Get Free?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us, Sam. I am Nicole. I'm the executive director of Get Free and one of the co-founders of it. Get Free is a youth-led movement to prepare past harms, remove ongoing barriers to equality, and realize a future where freedom is for all. It was built by a bunch of young movement organizers, really understanding that we can't have a true multiracial democracy until we reckon with the harms of white supremacy, which color a lot of things that have happened in the United States, including our current political reality. So we'll get more into that later, but that's a bit about me. Really happy to be here.
Thanks so much for having us. I'm Anthony Torres. He, him. I am the communications director at Get Free and another one of our co-founders. And as Nicole mentioned, we brought some folks together just before the pandemic and before the Black Lives Matter uprising that year, because we knew we needed a new movement strategy for how we were going to overcome the white supremacist and authoritarian threats we face today by ultimately building a movement to get free from these harms and these wrongs at their historic foundation. So excited to discuss it
Yeah.
more.
Me too. Yeah. The first question that I have for you guys out the gate kind of relates to that because, um, you know, my real question is like, why is Get Free not freaking out right now? There's a lot of organizations, a lot of elected officials who don't seem to know how to act right now. And it seems like Get Free has a clear path forward. You guys have an action plan that is happening right now. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can kick us off on that. Why are we not freaking out? That's an interesting way of phrasing this. I think, the important one just background important thing to realize is what's happening right now has happened before. This is actually the rule of America, not the exception. And there have been movements before us, the civil rights movement, the abolitionist movement. These were movements that were created and won in similar, if not worse, conditions than the conditions that we're in right now. We don't like to think of, we don't really always think of Jim Crow South, that era, as a moment where there was white supremacist authoritarianism like we're seeing today, but that was a reality. Black people didn't really have rights or protections. And even amidst those conditions, um, that movement was able to build popular support, win transformative change that actually made America freer and fairer for everyone in its wake, and put it into a position to undo harms of white supremacy. So we've been here before, and we are here again. And I think that's part of the underlying reason why we're not freaking out right now. Um, uh, Beyond that, I'll say that we have been tracking the rise of this movement for ever since Get Free was fully out in the world, and we are really grounded in this movement's origins, which are not just in the past 5 years or even 20 years, but really stretch back to before the history of the United States. And so, especially in the past couple of years, we've seen this movement, the MAGA, faction, take over the Supreme Court, um, consolidate power electorally, and have been ringing the alarm bell around it, even when we saw like Roe getting rolled back, affirmative action getting rolled back around what was to come. And so now it's really just the fruition of all of that manifest and maybe more visible to some, but not a surprise to those of us who've been tracking it this whole time. So that's a little bit of the meta around why we're not freaked out. And I can toss it over to Anthony to talk more about our campaign and our plan that we have in the face of it. So toss it over to Anthony.
I certainly feel a lot of the emotions that I'm sure so many folks listening have gone through an emotional roller coaster in these past few weeks and months. And all of that is, valid and understandable. For us at Get Free, what's grounding us, as Nicole mentioned, is this understanding that we've had around not only that the urgent threat that we face today is old rather than a new one, but also grounded in the fact that we did, we can, and we will, that this is a dark period, and our ancestors in the abolitionist and civil rights movements defied perhaps even greater odds and darker moments in order to reshape our country for the better. And we're applying those very strategies where they not only resisted, but refused to comply with the white supremacist policies of their time, and ultimately built the people, narrative, and political power needed to rewrite the rules and create major defeats for this white supremacist faction. And so what we are doing today is continuing in those footsteps by pursuing what we're calling our Freedom Beacons campaign. So in these first 100 days of the MAGA regime, we know that this is a critical period for us to set what are going to be the red lines for the rest of their years in power. And it's our opportunity before this administration fully consolidates their power for us to call on everyone else. So the leaders of our local governments and state governments, the leaders of our schools and universities, of our workplaces and other institutions, to call on them to refuse to comply with this MAGA agenda to lock in white supremacist rule, and instead to commit to defending and deepening our freedoms by turning the places we live into freedom beacons. And our goal is by the end of this first 100 days, by taking action, by activating people across race, place, and ultimately bringing folks together to get these institutional leaders to stand with us rather than capitulate to this regime, that this will form the foundation through which we'll ultimately be able to persevere through this dark time and ultimately get us further down the path to true reckoning and repair.
I think one thing just to add on to it is that this is like grounded in strategies that have like happened before. Civil resistance is not only an American thing. There have been movements all across the country who have used noncompliance as a means of really taking power and undermining really hostile agendas. We saw it, you could see it in South Africa, you can see it here in the United States in the civil rights movement, you can see it in, Nazi occupied, territories during World War II. And so I think that this is just what this looks like in this moment and in this context. And what we're doing is really juxtaposing what is happening in the Trump administration with freedom in order to little dog bark in order to really create a choice, right? Being like, hey, if you actually believe in equality and freedom and all these things America says it is, it means you're not complying with mandates that are rolling back civil rights, hundreds of years of progress, undermining equality. You're not for that. And so cloaking noncompliance in values and values that are deeply ingrained is part of the strategy that we're working with here. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because so much of it is about, there, like you mentioned, Anthony, like there's a lot of overwhelm happening right now. And that is a strategy that the administration is using to make it so that they can push forward their agenda as quickly as possible. And then it's harder for us to roll that back, as you said. And so what I really like about y'all's approach is it's obviously people first. We're starting from the ground up. It's not leadership led. We're seeing how that has worked in the Democratic Party when you look at top down leadership. And a lot of the Democrats really aren't acting right now. But there's also the action part. And we were talking about this earlier. Like, there's so much hopelessness, and hopelessness is the point. If we get that overwhelm and then we feel hopeless, then we're not acting and we're not recognizing that actually the people around us don't agree with this either. And so I really appreciate that, it's people led, and then you're telling these leaders and elected leaders that we aren't for this. So much of the administration is like, this was a mandate. We won outright, which is not true when we look at the election results. Yes, they won the popular vote, but the amount of people that did not vote, the voter suppression that we saw, like, this is not a mandate. And you guys are really saying that we don't have to pretend that it is.
And even people who did vote for Trump didn't vote for what is happening, really.
Right.
And so I think that, just to your point, like, action encourages bravery and feels good, but it also creates clarity around what is happening. So if you can create an action that says, hey, this is actually a historic rollback of civil rights, and like, that's what's happening here, that invites people into seeing things more clearly. And again, this is like the same thing that lunch counter sit-ins did in the civil rights movement, really visibilizing the injustice, naming it, making it clear and plain, just to like let people know, oh, right, I'm not actually for this. This is against my values, and we need to do something about it. This is an urgent thing to act upon. And I feel like action also lead to political action. Like, that's how it happens historically, is people taking action, people being clear about an issue, trickles up to electeds to then do something about it, never the reverse, which is what you're talking about. And Get Free took action not even that long ago, and Anthony was a part of making that happen. So maybe this is a good segue into like talking about why that action was really vital and necessary that happened on Monday.
Yeah.
Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, and we actually featured that in our newsletter last Tuesday. So Anthony, please share what it was like on the ground.
Well, thank you, Sam, for amplifying it. As Nicole mentioned, we know that we have to take action, and we have to experiment with different ways that we can light the spark that ultimately will catch amongst all of the different people and places who believe in making freedom and equality real, but right now are overwhelmed, understandably cynical, or just don't know what to do. And so when we were seeing the latest round of MAGA attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, seeing them try to abolish civil rights protections and programs, and even trying to steal and seize public funding for so many of the services that families across the country rely on as part of their agenda to rule for a wealthy white few. We knew that right now was a moment where we needed an intervention. And if you recall, more than a week and a half ago, there wasn't much action happening. There was a lot of concern, but very few people had yet transformed that concern and turned that anxiety and despair into defiant action. So we brainstormed quickly a couple of things that we could do, and we put together a team that included some of our leaders and organizers, but also a bunch of our brand new members in the DC area. And together came up with an action where we decided we were going to model civil disobedience and refusal to comply with this agenda through an action at the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, which is where a lot of these MAGA orders and directives have been delivered from. And ultimately, demonstrate visibly that choice and model and show people that people like them are willing to take action in this moment, to make it clear to them, literally through our actions. We were disrupting the commute into that office building and holding a sit-in both in the street and then in the garage and staff entrance, demonstrating that, hey, this is actually what we should be doing at a crisis of this level. We should be demanding that every single staff member, leader, institution, passerby join us in demanding that not only that these attacks stop, but making it clear that it's only through our actions that we're going to be able to prevent them from taking away civil rights, from destroying a generations of progress, and ultimately to winning the future of freedom that we deserve. So we took that action late last Monday, so just earlier last week. And I'm really glad that we were one of many hands that was pushing that boulder of inaction down the mountain, and part of a week where people in groups across the country finally also began taking action and pushing that call for us to refuse to comply.
Yeah. Yeah, I love because you're making it very visible in public, especially in DC. And I think so much right now is like people need to see before they act.
And they need to see to understand, actually. They need to see to understand the level of crisis that's happening.
Yeah.
And you were speaking earlier about Democrats, and like Democrats like tepidly like standing by a door with like 40 Democrats and like one guy and just being like, could you please move? Like that's not actually communicating the level of crisis that is really happening. And the problem of this moment is that a lot of stuff that is happening is like bureaucratic. It's in DC. People don't get it. They don't see it.
Yeah.
But they're going to feel it really deeply in a couple of weeks and months when that comes home. And so bringing that urgency to the present when something could actually be done about it is really vital, and that's why action is necessary right now.
We are going to start to transition into our private podcast where we're going to get a little bit more into the strategy. I know you guys just had a leadership gathering with some amazing leaders from across the country. Before we do that, I did want to just, can you just share a little bit about the actions that people can take? Like, how should they find you? How can they get involved in Get Free? And what do you recommend that they start with?
Great. So you can follow us on Instagram, getfree_MVMT. And we are having mass calls every month. And so we've got an upcoming call at the end of this month, February. I believe it is on whatever that Wednesday is, but you can find the information on our Instagram handle and follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky. Blue Sky, we're not saying Twitter anymore. You can go to our website. I don't know. Anything else to add, Anthony? You can find us online and plug in. There are opportunities.
If you want to find Get Free and get involved with us, you can go to our website, getfreetogether.org. You can follow Get Free Movement on pretty much every social media platform. A lot of our information is up on our Instagram and Blue Sky and TikTok, and we have links in our bios on those platforms for you to sign up for the next mass call that we're hosting. So as Nicole mentioned, we're having them monthly. So there's a monthly opportunity for you to join and find your place in the movement. One of the upcoming trainings we're having is giving folks ways to start their own local Get Free team or pod or chapter. And we're going to be having some fun and powerful actions that we're cooking up right now for the rest of the first 100 days of this administration. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I love it. Have some fun, build some community, and act. And that's the way.
Yeah. To those listening, like, just do something. You'll feel better. If you're feeling overwhelmed or like everything is chaotic, do something that will help. That's my last offering. Over to you, Anthony.
Yeah, I think that the last thing I'll leave with people is something I said earlier about we did, we can, and we will. Our ancestors, or even many of us on this call, have faced great odds, have faced down this white supremacist faction before. They are terrified of our power. That's why they're moving so desperately and so quickly right now. And we can do it again, but it's going to take us experimenting, doing things, both in new ways and familiar. And it's going to really just take us understanding our shared stakes and not just what we have to lose, but what we have to win together.
Yeah. I love that. My friend always says we're in a fight for the future and the future will win. We just have to act. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Nicole and Anthony, for joining. We will link all of the Get Free stuff. So please get involved. It's an amazing organization and we'll see you again.
Yeah, I hope so. Thanks so much, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.